Hey, good evening. It's Monday night, December 28th. Wasn't able to get the video this morning, but we'll pick up tonight and get back in the groove. What I want to talk about tonight is the question I mentioned earlier on Saturday. What is normal? And you see, that's especially significant for us as we're thinking about 2020 and 2021, because for most of us, it would be fair to say 2020 was not normal. And that's true. There are a lot of surprises there. But what is not normal for us is totally normal for God. So what I'm suggesting that we rethink here is, what is normal? Is normal how I define it, or is normal how God defines it? Am I letting God's good providence become my norm, or is normal something that I dictate? The American Heritage Dictionary defines normal this way: conforming with, adhering to, or constituting a norm, standard, pattern, or level, or type, something that is typical. But for all this to work, there has to be a standard by which to establish what is normal. Now, if we're talking about temperatures, body temperature, in a non-metric culture, we make that 98.6. That's the normal temperature for people. Lower than that is not good. Higher than that is especially not good. Or we can measure air temperature. But you see, then we start to get into some of the problems with the idea of normal. So if I take the air temperature of a particular city and I do it for a whole year, I wind up with a number that is not really helpful, because that number might be 62 degrees, but that doesn't reflect the heat of summer or the cold of winter. It's just an average for the whole year. See, those are some limitations of the idea of normal. But then it gets a little bit more personal. It gets a little trickier. When Ruth and I decided to get married, one thing we wanted to do was to meet each other's parents, because we lived far away from each of them. We met in Pennsylvania. My parents were in Miami. Her parents are in Anchorage, Alaska. So we took this grand trip, flew down to Miami and then flew up to Anchorage. We started with Miami because it was closer. So one common thing between my home and her home was neither home had air conditioning. Now, if you think about that for a minute, that sounds like it's got the same situation, but Miami and Anchorage? Ruth coming to Miami in the middle of summer, because it was in July, without air conditioning, that was a shock to the system. Me going up to Anchorage wasn't a big deal, because in the summertime it's quite pleasant there. My home was 24/7 sports. It was an Olympic summer. Baseball, football. Ruth's family, they didn't do TV sports. So you could kind of get a sense of the fact of my normal, her normal. Are we going to be able to merge this normal and get a new normal that we're going to be happy with? We managed to work it out, but it's an interesting challenge. But that just shows you some of the difficulties of trying to come up with normal and the danger of it. Let's make normal and take it to a personal level in terms of behavior. And this is where I believe normal is something why I'm going to spend several days on this, because it's so important. This is where normal begins to cause problems, when we apply it to behavioral norms. Daniel Boorstin, writing in his Pulitzer Prize winning series on American history, describes the invasion impact of beginning to use normal instead of laws and absolutes of God. The man who's probably the most influential in this G. Stanley Hall is not a name we know very well, but I would suggest it's probably one of the most influential names in your entire life. So Borston, reading from Picking Up the Narrative, there was something appealingly democratic about Hall's new scientific faith. See, Hall popularized psychology in a big way. Christianity had relied on a ministry of the gospel, on sacred authoritative texts, and it enlisted faith in an authority and a benevolence of a fatherly God. But psychology, in Hall's vision, referred man to no higher authority but himself. That is, except perhaps the psychologist. Its sacred text was experience, and it made man a rule unto himself. Who would you know that man ought to be? Discover for the first time what man is. In the place of the thou shalt nots of the Decalogue of the Bible, the Ten Commandments, psychology would substitute open questions. What is man? How does he behave? And get this, psychology, the science of uniting the is and the ought, was the supremely democratic science. That's the appeal of psychology. Hall goes on to say, for it referred all questions of human behavior, not to any higher authority, not to some traditional scripture, but to the normal behavior of men. To the normal behavior of men. So what problems does this present for normal behavior, for moral behavior? And how is this concept of submission to normal behavior impacted our lives? Think about that. We'll pick it up in the morning. It's important things for us to grasp. No, thanks for hanging in there tonight. Lord bless you as you rest. Have a great evening. Good night.